Protests are happening all around the country. And what are these protests about? I think these protests are about the draconian laws and the way people are being handled, because they don't make sense. I can go in and buy a lottery ticket, but I can't go to a store to buy a handgun. How is a lottery ticket going to help me out now, where a handgun might help me out to stay safe? There was an incident up in Idaho. We have the mother who was arrested in Idaho at this park. And I don't necessarily agree with her, but I don't necessarily disagree. I think the police were in a really bad situation. And it's the mayor. It doesn't make sense. How can I not take my kids to a park, a public park, to play, but I can take my kid in to buy a lottery ticket? I could take my kid into to Walmart. Yeah, I know that it the virus lasts on playground equipment, but it also is sitting there on boxes at Walmart. It's just not consistent. Now, what's happening are you have places like the banning of protests at all California state capitals and all California state land. They're not giving any more permits. Well, if you can't go protest your leaders at their place of business, if you will, the state capitol, what good is your protest? People just want to go back to work in places where they know they can. Nobody's fighting to open up New York right now. Nobody wants people to die. They just want common sense. And the media is making this worse. The governments are making it worse by being draconian. And the media is making it worse because they're trying to paint everybody into some sort of evil George Soros figure that is plotting all of this. I saw a story the other day that I found fascinating because this guy named Ben Dorr, he is a political activist, and he's probably worse than George Soros because he's just stirring things up in Minnesota, and none of these Facebook groups are real. All of these things are just stirred up by the evil right-wing gods, and it's AstroTurf. We've heard this before. Well, I'd never heard of Ben Dorr before. He's a political activist. Okay, he's the director of the Minnesota gun rights. I decided to call him up and talk to him, and here he is. Ben, are you George Soros?
Significantly less well-funded.
Significantly. Yeah.
Significantly. Well, that's been the question
Yeah.
we've been getting, and thanks for having me on, Glenn. I appreciate it. That's been the question we've been getting from, well, frankly, left-wing media for the last 48 hours is who's funding this big cabal? Who's the, what puppet masters are behind this? Is President Trump paying you to put on these protests? Who's doing this? It's simply grassroots Americans who are standing up. They want their jobs back. They want their lives back. They want their freedom back. And it's not a hard stretch to imagine that hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans are standing up to say that enough is enough.
So, Ben, there is a new poll out that shows that it's about 80% of the general population and about 60% of Republicans that say, no, I don't think this is bad, this shelter-in-place rule, and I don't think it's doing more harm than good on the economy now. I think many people are dismissing the parts of the country that can go back to work, that aren't seeing real bad things. So what are you saying? Should we open New York up right now?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to suggest that we put people in a dangerous situation, not by a long shot. But the fact of the matter is, there's all these polls. People talk about polls. Like, well, the poll said that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Had a 98% chance of carrying the presidency. So it's classic for polling to more or less ignore the common man. I mean, we started a group a Facebook group in Wisconsin called Wisconsinites Against Excessive Quarantine. And
who paid for that Facebook group? Who paid for that Facebook group, Ben?
Nobody paid for it. Facebook groups don't cost anything. They don't cost anything. We started the group. I put a handful of my friends in there, and 105,000 Wisconsin citizens have joined that group in just a handful of days. So when you sit there and say that 80%, if the polling suggests that 80% of Americans are happy with having no income, that they're happy with having their jobs, basically destroyed, that they can't even go, sit on a boat by themselves on a lake and go fishing, I think that's kind of nonsense.
So are you, because I think this is where people are. If you just tell them and say, hey, here are the recommendations, the vast majority of people will do it. They don't have a death wish for themselves or for their neighbors. The problem are these rules and regulations that make no sense whatsoever. No sense. You're going to stop me for driving my car. You actually going to just see if I'm an essential worker or if I'm driving in my car just because I want to drive around. What right do you have to do that? And it's making people more angry than it's doing good. If they would just treat us like adults and as the owners of the government and the country, I don't think we'd have these protests.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the precedent that's being set here by some of these draconian governors in states across America, like Tim Walz in Minnesota and Tony Evers in Wisconsin and Wolf in Pennsylvania. I mean, these are decisions being made by them, setting a precedent to take people's rights and freedoms away in the future. In Minnesota, most people cannot get permits to carry firearms anymore because, well, under this, mandated health order, most sheriff's departments are no longer accepting applications. People's rights are being suspended at an incredible rate in states all across America. And like you said, you can't even do some of the basic fundamental things that Americans do, without, basically, show us your papers. And so what's to stop this stuff from happening again in the future? What's to stop them from, say another shooting takes place, another Dayton, Ohio takes place, and all of a sudden you have the health director issuing a public health order and saying that the Second Amendment is going to be suspended because it's now a public health crisis. Where does this end for Americans and their freedom?
So I'm reading an article by Matt Binder. Over the past few days, protests against stay-at-home orders have sprung up all across the country, blah, blah, blah. But these protests aren't exactly organic. They're being organized and promoted by connected right-wing figures on Facebook, including a gun rights group. 5 of these groups are being run by a single family, the Dorr family. Facebook displays the administrators for both public and private groups. As the Washington Post points out, the group run by the Dorr family have a combined 200,000 members and counting, and they were all created in the last week. The Dorrs have a history of supporting right-wing causes. Ben Dorr, who's an administrator for every one of the groups, is the political director of an organization called Minnesota Gun Rights. The Dorrs have been promoting corresponding websites such as Reopen Minnesota, Reopen Pennsylvania, and their Facebook groups. They say that you are a scammer and people should stay away from any group that the Dorr family is behind. So who's in your family? It sounds scary.
Yeah, well, we're not surprised to see left-wing media and politicians, they particularly love to smear us, but that's simply because my family, I'll tell you, we love America, we love our freedom, we love our flag, we love our founding fathers, our gun rights, the rights of the unborn. That's what we're all about. It's what we've always been about. And, I'll tell you, years ago, we started out on this path. We started gun rights organizations in states like Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, the blue wall, to be totally honest with you. We want to change the conversation in America. We want to give a voice back to the people whose voices have been snuffed out, who have been forgotten by politicians, by the media, who pretend these people do not exist. We draw a hard line in the sand. We fight hard. We fight nasty. We really do. We're very aggressive in our defense of the Second Amendment and so many other issues across America and in these states in particular. And so when we sat here and watched these governors just shove their thumb down on the people of Ohio and Minnesota and Pennsylvania and take away their freedoms like this, we launched these Facebook groups, Ohioans against excessive quarantine and Pennsylvanians against excessive quarantine, Minnesota, Wisconsin, New York, and others, to give a voice back to the people, to give them an opportunity to get in touch with their lawmakers and tell them what they expect. And we're very proud of it. We're very, very proud of it. We've never hidden it before. I know that some of these left-wing media outlets are saying revealed, the Dorr brothers, the folks behind the curtain. Well, we've never made a secret of it. We're very proud, very honored to do the work that we do. So we make no apologies.
Well, I just want to give you one last quote and a chance to respond to this. This is from a sociologist at Drexel University who's been doing a lot of research focused on climate lobbying, by the way. But he says these are extreme right-wing efforts to delegitimize government. It's an anti-government crusade.
Well, I think that the power of government rests in the palms of the people. And the power of government resides with the people. And so when power is taken away from government and goes back to the folks who are paying these taxes, whose lives are being destroyed by these excessive quarantines, whose small businesses are being annihilated by these excessive quarantines, whose jobs aren't going to exist when the quarantines are lifted here. If that's delegitimizing government, no, I think it's simply giving a voice back to the Americans who make this country tick. They make it work. They make it great. And we're just trying to give that voice back to them so they can reclaim their freedom, their jobs, their livelihoods. And again, we couldn't be more proud to do it with them and for them.
Why are they so afraid of you, Ben? Why does the media feel so threatened?
Well, they need to make this look like it's a couple of puppet masters pretending that this is a grassroots movement. They don't want to acknowledge that Americans are rising up by the hundreds of thousands and trying to take their country back. They don't want to acknowledge that Americans aren't satisfied with having their jobs destroyed. They like the economy being down in the dumps. They don't want it to come roaring back before the 2020 elections. We're not surprised to see this at all. We think President Trump has done a wonderful job. The left-wing media, they love to keep down patriots. They love to attack everyday Americans, Trump supporters, conservatives. We're not surprised to see these things. It's an agenda. I mean, the Washington Post, they put out this article about us. There's a reason that President Trump gave them a fake news award a short time ago. We're not surprised to see this because government and media always fight back when the power is being taken from them and returned to the people. They want the power. They want the control. They don't want Americans to have it. And the Dorr brothers, well, we're pretty good at giving the power back to the people and helping to give them a voice.